What rugby league picked up on was the player development, and I think that was a challenge to all of the clubs that made their application. There were some real challenges when clubs had, it was boom and bust to get into Super League. It was very difficult to nurture youngsters through and actually get them a game. So when push come to shove and we start counting through how many players the club had created, we'd fell one or two short. Even though we felt we had some real stars in that. Your Richie Milers and whatever, but they weren't around long enough before the application was made. So we've done a lot of work to make sure that we get the right side of that this time.
If we do get in this time, are we in a better position to be successful than we were last time round?
Well, we've watched how difficult it's been for the clubs that were successful. Nobody in the sport takes any pleasure out of the clubs that have found it really hard. So I think we've got to learn from that. We've got to watch what the challenges were. Well, in Yorkshire, in Manchester, and in Wales, and we have to make sure that we are more robust than that going forward, and make sure that apart from being an irresistible bid, the bid document is actually our business plan, and we've got to make sure that we can it's sustainable.
Right. Just ask both Dennis and Steve this question. The decisions are made in March, which is 12 months before you actually come in Super League. Do you think that's a good thing for on the field and off the field, or could it have a bad effect whereby, players say, we're going in Super League, or the club's in Super League, and you relax?
I think when you look at the plan that all the backroom staff, through Steve, through Judy Gaskell, through Paul and through Terry, have worked very, very hard to make sure that there's a sustainable club, sustainable business, sustainable environment there. We're striving for success. We want success on the field. We want to be a successful organisation. But that can't be just seen as winning silverware. That has to be developing youth. It has to be nurturing sponsorship, getting stakeholders involved so that the club actually is very, very strong. When you look across sport, not just in rugby league, you look across sport, you see how vulnerable most sporting organisations are. I think you see that bid and you see a very, very strong...
Do you think that 12 months advance notice will stop the bust and boom scenario that we've seen with Super League clubs?
Well, it should do. It should see you better prepared. And Gary was talking about a question before about would we be better prepared? Well, there's always been a plan. And I remember sitting down with Steve a couple of years ago and saying about the youth, that you've got to buy into the youth. It's not all about first team rugby and putting a lot of money into it and then going out and if you're trying to sign all the best players in Super League, bringing them from overseas and trying to put a team together, it's all about sustainability. And 2 years ago we said about where we wanted to be when we got to 18s. Our 18s have been the best in the competition, and we're not talking about championship here, we're talking about when they played in the Super League competition. Our under 16s were unbeaten. So obviously let's go forward 2 years. Our 18s will be 20s, they'll be playing in the top line. Our 16s will be playing 18s, and then the conveyor belt of talent coming through the system will hopefully be very good for the Vikings.
And Steve, you did say before about the first document that went in 3 years ago, now this one. It certainly appears that the structure that's been put in place concerning bringing your own players through is on firm foundations.
It is. I mean, just to go back to that original document 2.5 years ago, in fairness, we had to do that at some pace, and we were on a very, very steep learning curve. And I think that it was just as important that by the time we get in, we're seen as a winning organisation. Now we've managed to get to 2 cup finals. We've not been as successful as we'd like to have been in the in progressing in the playoffs, but Terry and Dennis have convinced me the group we've got at the moment will be much, much better next year, so I'll just put a bit of pressure on them anyway. So we want to go in as winners, don't we?
Well, you do. And Dennis...
Thanks for that, Steve. That's the first time he's told me that, by the way.
Oh, well, welcome to the real world. Yeah. Brilliant stuff. Do you think there'll be a requirement for you to use the younger players more than you would normally if indeed they're successful in a team environment?
I think if they're right and they're good enough, then they'll play. We're working quite hard. We've got a lot of people behind the scenes through the youth system working hard with these kids to make them stronger and better players. My job is then to see that they are ready to be able to step into the first team and deliver, but then nurture them a little bit and say that a few mistakes is not going to hurt them. Know that they are talented kids and that's only going to make them stronger. There's a pretty strong group of kids there at the moment, and I've been really impressed over the last 2 or 3 weeks when I've seen them performing.
Well, of course, I was going to say you made your name playing for Wigan. It was a great team, that Wigan of the late 80s and 90s. Terry, you were part and parcel also of the Wigan setup. Is there anything from those days that you think is still relevant today in terms of behind the scenes, Terry?
Professionalism. That is the biggest thing, and what your aspirations are. Are you dedicated enough? Do you sacrifice things in your own personal life? Because the best players that I've ever known in the game of rugby league have been them sorts of characters, and it's really instilling that into these players that there's more to life than 80 minutes of rugby on a Sunday or a Friday night. You've got to live your life right as a rugby league player, and your life off the pitch is as important as your life on the pitch. If you're not willing to sacrifice things and you just want to be the walk around strutting around thinking you're a professional rugby league player, well, you're absolutely miles off.
So I've been talking to a couple of academy coaches this last couple of days, generally speaking, and granted what you've been saying is terrific from a Widnes point of view, from the youngsters and the academy you've set up, but they were saying to me that when they are looking around for kids coming on as well, Dennis, that they are not seeing natural people that you were talking about, 1, 7 and 9, 13 if you like. They're saying they have to almost manufacture that every kid wants to be is a second rower, and they're saying what we're finding is a shed full of second rowers, and if you want an actual Andy Gregory type player, they're very difficult to come by.
The game's changed as well. I think we've got to stop looking back at Andy Greggs and Murphys and things like that. They were talented players in their area, but the game's changed a little bit as well. We have to try and find them. We're working in a very competitive market with lots of sports, and to find those kids early enough and then to bring them on. And every professional sport dictates you have to nurture them now, because a little bit treat them with kid gloves and work them hard. But I think Terry's there. You've got to create an environment now, and it might come to a shock to people, but hard work really helps you. And I think that's what comes down to. Like the team of Wigan in its day had a lot of hard workers.
I agree with you both to a certain extent, but quite frankly, I am just absolutely fed up and sick and tired of this so-called utility player in this modern game. The second row who plays in the centre, the loose forward who plays at standoff, the hooker who plays at full back. You know, it's time we got back, Dennis, to creating centres, scrum halves, hookers, standoffs. Australia do it, and New Zealand do it. You know, you don't see those playing in the centre. You don't see Benji Marshall trotting out at loose forward.
They've got a bigger pool. I know we've got a lot of players over there, but they've got a bigger pool of talented players.
Pool, Dennis.
They have the selection from New Samoa, the selection from Fiji, the selection from Tonga. They have a bigger pool of the islanders that play in that competition. I mean, let's not kid ourselves. They have a lot of genetically talented people that play the game in New Zealand, and from those islands that get brought in there. I know they're competing with rugby union quite heavily as well, but they've got a big pool of talented kids there. And yeah, we have to be able to push those people as well, but I'm sure you played in the centre a couple of times in your time. Right?
Never. Dick Hoodett did with me. He could run. I couldn't run. I played prop forward, Dennis, but not centre.
Let's bring the chairman of Widnes Vikings back in here, Steve O'Connor.
I think we shouldn't miss out the fact that I really agree with the licensing system. The idea of getting 3 years does actually allow you to blood a lot of youngsters, because I think the idea, historically, what I understand of the game was that the boom bust meant there was 4 or 5 clubs every year who had to do everything they could to stay in. So developing talent that they would give a game to was going to always be difficult. You know, I think we can grow into the sport, and we can actually afford to we've got some great halfbacks, we've got a great 6, we've got 2 great 7s, we've got a couple of good fullbacks who we'd like to blood later on.
That's brilliant coming from the chairman of a club that wants to be successful, that he knows that, and those kids are going to fail, but if we're willing to stick with them, they're not going to get better by just giving them a chance, and then when they don't make the right kick, make the wrong pass, we kick them out the side and bring in Australian or New Zealand in. We actually get them better, make them better.
It is by far the furthest thing, the licensing. When you have the 3 years to build, and going forward, the Super League years ago, before the licensing came in, was always about, like Steve was saying, it was a 2-tier competition. You'd had 4 or 5 teams at the top who were going for silverware, and then the rest of them underneath that, they were struggling. And are we going to be in Super League next year? Are we not? Are we going to get? So they'd go out and they'd just go for an overseas player. They wouldn't have a clue what his background was off the pitch. They wouldn't know what he was like as a character on the pitch. They pay him £100,000, and all of a sudden, at the end of the year, they get relegated. the player goes, they don't add anything to the competition, they don't add anything to the club, they don't leave a legacy behind them with any of the youngsters that they brought through. So I do think it's the fair way to go.
Terry O'Connor, Dennis Betts and Steve O'Connor from Widnes Vikings. Gary, you want a word in here, do you?
Fans want success, fans want to watch a winning team, and it's all very well saying put young players out, but if you're putting young players out and you're not winning games, fans, perhaps rightly so, paying the money, will get upset. I just wonder, how you cope with that.
They don't want to see a competitive side as well, or they want to see a side that wants to play for its club. Let's give the fans a little bit of credit. They will appreciate the fact that we've got local young kids in there. They're going to suffer a little bit, but they're going to suffer to get something out at the end of it, and that's what they're going to get back. And as long as they see effort and they see endeavour and they see a side that really, really wants to play for that shirt, and you're going to get a local lad who wants to do that, and you're going to get somebody who's always been brought up thinking about the Milers, the Humes and the O'Neills that made that side a really, really great side, not the overseas players.
169, the players you're talking about, who perhaps, if we can develop that talent, there's obviously a niche, because there isn't the talent in those right positions when the World Cup comes round in 2013.
Terry, when you're manufacturing a lad that's not a natural 7 or a 9, I mean, how do you manufacture somebody?
The thing is that they do need to be a natural player. When it comes to like a key player like that, a 7, who needs to know how to organise a team, how to get them around the park. I was talking to Dennis yesterday about, I talked to Andrew Johns, who's the best 7 that in the game since I can remember, absolutely unbelievable, and talked to him about the game, and he just breaks it down so simply. He says the first 20 minutes I just let my forwards rip in, said 9 out of 10 sets, 1 completion. The next 20 minutes in the game I just turn the ball inside them, get to half time, complete sets, get to the kick. Second half, the first 30 minutes exactly the same as the first 40, last 10 minutes play the game. And that's why the Aussies are so good, because no matter what rattles them in the game, they can have 7, 8, 9 sets of 6 on the opposition's line. If they don't score, they'll just defend the next set of 6. We seem to be attack orientated over here in England, and if we can't score a try when we've put the opposition under pressure for 4 or 5 sets out, we then all of a sudden will defend it, and because we've not scored, we'll then concede a try.
So does this mean, Dennis, you're going to be working out tactical plays as the game goes on, given what time it is?
It's a very simple game. Just take a look at Ray. You know how simple it can be. I mean, it's
I'm
very,
coming in
very
for some stick
simple
tonight,
game. As always, Ray, as always. But no, I think we digress slightly away from the fact that the game is really simple. At the moment, what professionalism has done is it's made it manufacture